Guys, Roland here. Today we will be having an amazing conversation with Randy Veitenheimer. You can see him clearly if you're watching this video. Uh, but our conversation today will be going behind the scenes to get to know Randy Veitenheimer a little bit better. He has done a lot for us as folks on a spiritual path, interested in, I guess, non-mainstream studies. And Randy Veitenheimer, you know him, but maybe we can learn today a little bit about his journey to where he is right now. And we will have this conversation right after this. Welcome to Conversations with Roland, where the goal of this show is to learn life secrets through diverse experiences. I am your host, Roland Achenjang. Guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Roland. As always, I am super excited to record these conversations, and today's no different. You know my guest, Randy Veitenheimer, really needs no introduction. We will be taking a deep dive into his life today, and then hoping to learn from it, and maybe pick up some clues about where we are on our journey, and also maybe how to improve our journey or build on what we currently know about who we are, why we're here, why life is the way it is, and whatnot. And without any more fanfare, I'd like to welcome Randy Veitenheimer to another episode of Conversations with Roland. So, Randy, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning, Roland. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. Likewise.
Yeah.
We have been on sort of I'd say vacation.
Yeah, it's been highly entertaining. It's a proper attitude towards what's been going on. So,
absolutely. So far, let's see, what's today, the 19th of January. I'd just like to ask how your 2021 has been versus all of 2020.
I'm doing great. It's it's one of the things is you either participate in what I call your own reality, or you participate in everyone else's. Okay. I covered that the concept of zero reality and number one reality. Zero reality is winning right now. That's what I call it. Zero reality is your thoughts and feelings and all the information that's out there and all the goings-ons, right? And number one reality is just your local reality. It's you and what you can do. And I define that as reach, like what you can influence and accomplish in any given moment or day. And if you look at what you can do with yourself and around yourself, that really hasn't changed. Okay, there's been no material change in your circumstances. There's been modifications, maybe in travel or what you wear or things like that, but you're still able to do things, particularly within yourself or for yourself. And it's something that gets lost as soon as you get off into thinking and feeling and being involved in everything except yourself or your immediate surroundings. So that's kind of my idea. So I always have literally hundreds of things to do. I never run out. One of the ways I was taught, you're supposed to go to bed physically tired, not just mentally exhausted. And I think in today's society, a lot of people are going to bed at night mentally exhausted because they're caught up in their thinking. And there's a term we use called thinking won't give it. And it's really true. No matter how much you think, you could still not get there or do something. You have to actually have action that contributes to that. So I covered that in the YouTube thing because people talk about manifesting and this, that, and the other. And of course, they leave out you, which is the most important thing. That's what I do. I work on a person is work on them to be themselves. And from that point, the universe expands. Your life expands. There's all kinds of things that come into potential. And I guess that's true for me too when I started on this planet. So when you ask me to do this, it's like, golly, there's a million different directions of what else is going on in my life. And I'm sure it's true for a lot of people. But I find it highly amusing to talk about myself this way. So the main reason is because I've gotten this far, I'll put it that way. So, right.
But you are the best person to talk about who you are. I think it would be unfair to try to go to anybody else to say, hey, tell me about Randy Veitenheimer.
Oh my God. Yeah. I used to talk about this. I had a lady walk up to me at the end of a seminar one time and goes, I've heard a lot about you. And I go, yeah. What did you hear? And she said, well, half the people think you're a saint and half the people think you're a something other than that. And I said, it's true, right? It's true because what you think is how you feel and how you act. But remember, all thinking is a lie. That's what I teach. All thinking is a lie. You have to experience it and come to your own conclusions. So when I've talked about this, it's like thinking won't give it, and all thinking is a lie. People are like, oh my God. They have to come to terms that just because you can think doesn't mean it's true. Okay. And so we call that a spiritual trap. And it occurs at a very early age. Let's see what can happen with me. 4 years old, I guess. 5 is pretty standard. My God, I can think. Let me tell you what I'm thinking. Any 2-year-old will jump in the middle of it and get going. And by the time they're 5 years old, they are wound up into it, right? Mm-hmm. Let me tell you what I think. So,
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So then all our life, at some point, we have to go out of thinking. And normally we do that when there's negative events go on in our life, right? Thinking goes away. We devolve into the depression and being fixated on the past, which is depression. Or we become fixated on the future, which is anxiety. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So, right. So anyway, at 5 years old, we start thinking, and that's one trap. And I think we were talking today about kind of like what are the spiritual aspects or inflection points that occur in one's life. And they occur in everybody's life. I don't feel I'm different. I feel I may have had different timing. And that's another major thing is that I have a show that hopefully I'll be able to produce and start getting out called xtimelines.com. And it talks about this very subject. It's about how there's timelines to everything and how we interact with them. And so there's a timeline to life, number one timeline, and that's the one we're going to start with.
So just a random question with the idea of timelines to life, and that they are different for every person, and every person will experience, certain aspects at certain points. Do you think this has something to do with soul agreements before you incarnate on the planet?
I call them affinity bonds. Okay.
In
other words, the potential for a relationship, and then if we break it down, the potential for an interaction. So the potential for an interaction with any person, we'll say, is greater than 0. Whether it's positive or negative is also part of its potential, right? Mm-hmm. But with some people, that potential for interaction goes very, very high, right? It's like we call it instant soulmates, soul flames, twin. I mean, there's all the language where they're trying to describe that. And I like the language of what they call cultural appropriation of quantum physics. so I'm going to jump right in. I'm Native American, but I'm going to do cultural appropriation of quantum physics, of its language and ideas and concepts, because they actually correspond quite closely with spiritual type information. So quantum potential, field potentials, you to any person. It's like if your frequencies interact at a high enough level, it's like I'm instantly in love. So, or I'm instantly not in love. And we know that, but nobody ever stops to go, oh, why? Whoa, stop a minute. Let me think about, here we go, thinking again. And so we throw thinking out and go exploring because it is about us. That's why I reset a person to be themselves. It's totally about you. I agree with that. So, for instance, you say you love somebody, there's no object in that equation, is the language I use. You are being loving. Do you see? It's like, it doesn't make a difference who or what's in front of you. And then if you're being unloving, we'll call it the opposite, the reciprocal, then that's true. Your vibration is different. It's opposite polarity. I mean, all these things go on. And so every time we say we like something or love something or hate something or whatever, we're just talking about ourselves. And so that's a spiritual advancement, that when you can go out of blame and shame and all the judgmental type things. So that comes later. Okay, I'm sorry. It's just judgment is another one of those spiritual inflection points. All right.
Yeah.
That if you can get past that one, then you're in pretty good shape, right? So
I think so. Randy, talking about individuals expressing themselves and really much explaining how they feel about something, like you just said, if I say I love you, for instance, I'm being loving.
Yes.
Getting to that understanding of life where you're able to go beyond the regular everyday understanding that if I say I love you, I may actually think that I'm loving you because of something you're doing, or it has more to do with the other person. I think it's fascinating that you were able to get to this place in your life, right? To this level of understanding. And I'm just wondering if we can do the piece by piece, your early years, from 5 years old when you started thinking, maybe some events that led you to start saying, okay, why am I thinking the way I am? And is there another way to think that would help me cope more with this Earth life experience that we're having?
Well, it's interesting because what you just said, because I call them catalysts or inflection points or trigger points in acupuncture. There's all this language out there, and like I said, I've been appropriated in to be able to explain what really goes on in human life. I was born at the Pawnee Indian Hospital in Pawnee, Oklahoma. So there, a long, long time ago and far, far away. So that's an odd fact, because I was talking to another person, Native American, literally the other day, last week. And I said, he asked where I was born. I said, Pawnee Indian Hospital. He said, me too. And I go, really? Because you're like maybe in your 30s. And he said, yeah, I was one of the last babies born there. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that affinity bond where we radiate information. And it comes back when we find a corollary or find somebody that has similar experience. So when you talk about finding soulmates and stuff, you may be finding somebody that has a similar experiences, lives, whatever, right? So when I was born there, that's one, and we have the memory of everything that's going on, okay, but we don't access it as a rule, and I call them memory layers. So most people don't remember 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old. So a couple points is the Matrix movie when they say there is no spoon, is the little girl's bending a spoon every which way. There is no spoon. That's how you do that. The second thing that happens is that consciousness comes in, and it doesn't come in when you're born. It comes in before that. So this is a traditional Zen model of, I use 0 as the moment of birth and 00 the moment of conception, right? And then 000 is where you were before you were conceived, not where you were before you were born, right? And so that becomes a big, long subject for each one of those, right? And I actually did a couple of seminars and taught it at Oklahoma State University, one of them called God, Sex, and Love. And it deals with 000 before you were born, 00 sex, right? And 0 when you're born. And you're born theoretically out of love. If I wanted to be philosophical, I say you're born out of the love of God and the universe, right? And that's where we get the term, for the love of God. Only it's been appropriated to mean something like, maybe that's a negative about what kind of activities you've been up to, right?
Yeah.
Your mother would say that, right? But the first inflection point that I can remember, and I don't remember until my mother told me, and this is very late in her life. She says, son, do you know what happened when you were like a year and a half old? And I go, no, I don't. I don't remember at all. But it's really funny. Once she said it, I knew exactly. I remember, I can see the whole scene in my mind. And we were very poor. And we lived in a little trailer down by the river, which is a bad area. You know, wasn't there a song like Down by the Banks of the River Charles or something? Anyway, she said, one night I woke up, you were kissing me on the cheek and laughing, right? It's like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what's, she goes, I woke up and I'm like, what's going on? Now you got to remember, she's 16 years old, right? When I was born, right? Now, I'm kissing her, I'm standing at the bed and kissing her and laughing. And to this day, one of the things about me is I'm always smiling and laughing. I love being alive, right? And she's, you know, groggy, but she's trying to wake up, and finally hits her. The trailer's on fire, right? And so not knowing, not being able to communicate. So when you're 2 years old, or a year and a half, not talking, what's available to you? Well, I'd already learned how to laugh, right? And I'd learned that she kissed me, so I would kiss her back. I woke her up and we were able to get out of the trailer. You see what I mean? So here's what happens for the preservation of the self, which is our baseline thing, that we're supposed to be alive and work at being alive as long as we're alive. That's the way I feel, right?
Yeah.
No cheating, no drugs, alcohol, 2 pizzas, you know, as much as possible. Okay, there's the language, as much as possible. Okay?
I'm glad you added
yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you added the as much as possible, because I was actually going to also ask, you know, with cheating, that becomes really subjective to where if I can convince myself using your words in zero reality that what I'm doing is not cheating, and then experiencing physical reality with that thought, am I really cheating? Hey, Randy, wait a minute. Back to this story of the trailer being on fire.
Right.
You're 1.5 years old. I mean, every normal baby would be crying if they were awake at this time.
Right.
But it sounds like you weren't.
Right. There was, and I've really not explored that too much. I mean, I have the vision. I can go back and I literally see 3D video, and sometimes it's a problem, like people are talking to me because I tap in and I can see the whole scene, right? All the 3D reality of whatever was going on with them at that moment. And of course, sometimes I have to go stop, just stop, because I don't want to watch that show anymore, and they shouldn't either, right? But I would say that the awareness of the preservation of the self came to the forefront, and somehow I managed to get out of bed and get into where she was sleeping and do that, right? And what was the alternative? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have a very high sense of not hurting myself. Okay. And later when we talk, we'll talk about martial arts and where that comes in, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that some of the spiritual moves do no harm, right? Well, it's not external, right? It starts internal, right? And as best as you can do, you got that? It's like to be humans, to be alive, right? If I can eat one pizza, maybe I can eat two.
Absolutely. So, just real quick, the phrase "do no harm," that's one of the oaths we take in the medical community. As a pharmacist, I took that oath.
Right.
I think that was the very first line: "Do no harm." But we take that oath with the idea and intention that we do no harm to our patient. It's never meant for us to think. Let me not say it's never meant for us. Maybe it is, but I never got it as do no harm to myself until I got into the real world and started working and seeing how if I wasn't taken care of, it made it really difficult for me to take care of anybody else. And so I think that's really, really fascinating that you threw that out, and I just wanted to highlight it. When you talk of doing no harm, it's really not to whoever you're taking care of, but it's also to yourself. And I think that even though it may come off or sound selfish, it's really not selfish.
No. And it falls into this concept I have of using equations, right? Love is an equation. We can measure energy flow in both directions. That's it. But when you say do no harm, when you do harm external, you have done harm internal, because there is no object. Like if I'm harming you, I'm harming myself. I'm the one that's resonating with that experience. So the idea of doing no harm is like, why would I cause somebody or something to vibrate in a way that reflects me, right? Or reflects back on me? And because it is an equation, it is an entanglement in quantum physics. Right? So
I love that you threw the word entanglement out there. Yeah. It is a quantum physics word, but there was some in mainstream, I think it was the Smiths. She used the word entanglement to mean something totally different. Anyway, I couldn't agree more. And also, this part is where it gets kind of complicated, is that my approach to not doing harm to you in the way I interact with you may actually result in you feeling as though I am doing harm to you. I don't know if you get that.
Yeah, because the perception's on both sides. Remember, I love you, you love me. Well, I love you, but maybe you don't love me. You see what I mean? Maybe you're faking it or whatever. I mean, that gets into what we call convolutions, right?
Yeah.
And the convolutions are in your perception, reception first and then perception, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that at 1.5, I'm in a receptive state. And what that meant is the information was going to be detrimental to my health, well-being, and being alive. And I think that it required a jump in consciousness to be able to not scream, cry, freeze up, and all the other responses and lay there and die, but actually to get up. And to go into that room was to exhibit the joyfulness of being alive. And so I was kissy face and, laughing because, if you don't get me out here, we're all going to die. Yeah, it always ends up with we're all going to die. By the way, welcome to January 20th. But anyway,
no,
so,
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you woke up and had the wherewithal as well as the awareness to go and kiss on your mom and all that. That would get her up and then have her recognize what's going on. So this makes me think of a couple of questions for you about your childhood, Randy. Your dad. Do you mind speaking about your dad, presence in your life at all?
We would say that the universe is balanced between the positive and negative. How's that? Okay.
All right. That's that's chapter.
That's an easy way to put that.
Okay.
Back to that moment with my mother. It kind of like obliviated my childhood or being a child. That was the outcome of it, right? I could no longer be a child after that. It's kind of like once you confront death, you're no longer a child. Okay.
So you basically growed up.
Yeah. It and like you say, how do you get to a point of, say, being where I am now? It's like that was probably the initial. I probably would have been just a child up, whatever normal life, but you can at that point self-preservation becomes something very real, and most children don't hit that till probably about 10 years old, right? The idea of the self and that it may not be forever. You see what I mean? So
absolutely.
So that's what started this journey. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I'm glad that you tied that in as well, as far as what the after effects of that evening were. That's great. Siblings. Do you have any siblings?
Yes. At that time, I had one brother. I have a brother and two sisters, one of whom has passed away. One of the sisters has passed away. Right. Walked on is the native term.
Are they all older than you?
One brother older, right, who actually tells worse jokes than I do, which is almost impossible.
I was going to say, is that possible?
It just shows you the range of human experience and lives, right? But and I won't tell any of them because they're just too embarrassing. So, and mine are bad enough, but and then two younger sisters. Now, what's interesting, if you want to go to that, I was born on November 8th, right? My brother, 1 year and 5 days before, was born November 3rd, right? My sister was born November 3rd, 2 years after me. And then we have another sister, and we don't know when she was born or where she came from or who she is. So we take a family pod. Well, there's three of us that are just alike, and one of them that's not, right? And I actually explain that. I can explain that. But so people say, isn't that odd? And I go, well, isn't it Valentine's Day if you go 9 months before? So anyway, so there may have been some, the God, sex, and love thing comes into play. We're born by, and this is language as near as I've been able to tell, what I call first choice, second choice, third choice. So let's say I choose to be born to my parents for whatever reasons. It's like if you don't like your parents, pick better parents next time. But so what if they become unavailable, like in the pregnancy? I've worked where I had an office for 14 years that did nothing but work, or mostly work on women and pregnancies and pregnancy issues and things like that, and post-pregnancy. But let's say that they had an illness or circumstances changed, and you were all trying to go to that family, and all of a sudden it's not available for whatever reason. You would pick the next family in line, your second choice. And so when I was exploring, I was born to my parents by first choice. My sister was born first choice. The other one, my brother's born first choice. My sister that was born 4 years behind me was third choice. So the characteristics of her personality never fit the circumstances of our family unit, right?
Yeah.
So So we get into like self-awareness is the ability to sit there and look at everybody in your family unit, and then of course your immediate grouping, right, which is usually about 30 people, by the way.
Yeah.
And you just keep working your way out, and you can come to a pretty good understanding of yourself. So here's the basic rule. There is a instruction manual or a Bible to being human, and it's you, right? I mean, that's it. And so everything around you, every person, place, and thing contributes to your awareness if you want to engage it, right? And if you've already learned that lesson or thing, you can disengage.
So the human manual is just you if you pay attention to everything around you. Yeah.
You're given the wherewithal to be able to come to an understanding and come to an interaction with the universe, and that's you. And again, that's why most people aren't themselves. Dr. David Hawkins in Power versus Source introduced the concept that most people aren't themselves, that they become whatever state of consciousness they're experiencing at the moment, and eventually they can get locked into it. They can get into a level of consciousness, one of fear, which is prevalent right now, one of joy, one of love, one of guilt and shame. It's like there's a chart in that book, a chart of scale of consciousness, which explains those, and 14 other books that help to expand on it. I think that's the same thing about human life. We have a point of interaction, and we have the ability to explore it to the point of explanation, or we have the ability to explore it to the point of expansion, which goes back to this idea of timelines, all right, that I want to talk about. So, yeah, in the future. So, anyway.
Yes, that is actually a very good setup. We will be discussing David Hawkins' levels of consciousness in
yeah, that comes later. Yeah,
that comes
third edition, the third episode.
Yes.
So.
And to add to the idea of us being the source of information filled with what you would call a manual about who we are, I cannot agree more. Because I've come to the conclusion that the creator we believe in individually, whichever creator we believe in, if you want to appreciate that they sent you to this planet with nothing but your physical body, there was no paper in your mother's womb with you that said, oh, this is who Roland is and this is what he needs to do, you know. There's something fascinating about that for as long as human beings have been incarnating on this planet, no one has ever come with a manual, and everyone has always had a physical body encoded with information, a mind, the ability to breathe, that if they spent time interacting with themselves, getting to know themselves within, internally, physically, then they could, like you say, transcend this illusion that many of us get trapped in. And it doesn't matter the time of year when we incarnate. If you think way back when, human beings have always had the opportunity to interact with the environment. Right. The environment has changed a little bit, but that basic principle hasn't really changed.
No.
And so...
No. Everyone is born with a manual. The problem is, it's kind of like your focus. This is another thing that happens. Your internal landscape when you're a child, under 5 years old, is phenomenal, right? It's literally the many worlds theory of Casey. You're in many worlds when you're up to 5 years old, right? Almost every child I've ever asked under 5, do you have imaginary friends? Yes. Now, this gets in a whole nother subject, but it's called, the concept is essence, presence, and existence. And I'm trying to work out a little show about that, and I know what that means. But you existed before you were born. That's the main thing. You were given this body. It's an instruction manual. It has the whole show. Our DNA encoding that results in this body is the most phenomenal library in the universe. And of course, the ability to explore that, science wants to explore it from the outside. And all they can tell you is numbers and, positions and things like that, like spatial dimensions. But the internal aspects of that are infinite. That's what we would say. And so that's where the concept comes, you're an infinite being, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
So that,
I
anyway,
couldn't agree more.
We're up to 2 years old now.
Yeah, we are. But I mean, I don't mind varying like this. I think it's fascinating. I've been talking to you for, since February last year. It's almost a year.
Yeah, almost a year.
Yeah, and you've read my book. A lot of the same concepts and topics are discussed there. But okay, you're 1.5 years old. You have this experience, and you've basically decided that I like life. I don't want to die anytime.
Right.
So that's the curiosity of death has sort of been met. It's like, okay, this is something I don't want to experience. And so we move on. I don't know if there were any other major events that happened before you turned 18. What was grade school like, middle school, high school?
We'll keep moving along. I have to throw in one of my jokes. You learn things, and then later you find the language for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important, because today's language is different than when I was growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly when you have negative experiences, you can't integrate it. You don't have the language for it. And then later you go on, and now you have language for it. And then you want to use today's language to go back and try to correct something that the language didn't exist. And it's not possible. And that's where we get in the concept of letting go. So I had that experience and I let it go. I had no more use for that memory, right? But I think it did alter my timeline, right? In other words, I had a timeline where I could have died at that point, right, in time. But by waking up, I changed it. So we are capable of changing our timeline. This is a big deal that I teach, right?
I just, not to interrupt you randomly there, don't you think we're constantly changing our timelines every time we make decisions?
I explain it as we have a zero timeline. We go from basically 0 to 0. It's not, or 0 to 1, whatever language you want to use. It's a straight line. And any deviation as you turn sideways, go sideways from that line, the farther you get from your timeline, the more painful it becomes, until the pain is so great you get what we call a snapback, right? And then you snap back, and I get in trouble for telling marriage jokes, but let's say you get married and it didn't work out. The farther and more painful it becomes until finally you can't stand it, right? And then you quit, or they quit, and you get snapped back to your original timeline. Or you don't. Then you're hung up with 30 years later, you're going, I used to be married, or I used to be in school, or I used to do anything. But when you snap back to your original timeline, you find you can move forward again, right? And that's what it's about. But that gets into a concept whether we're moving forward or the universe is moving past us, and we're not getting into that right now. But the idea is that pain is the experience of moving away from your timeline. It's very simple, right?
Okay.
It's going to alter you in a way that spends time, takes time, whatever, right? It gets in a whole long deal. But so anyway, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and then I remember next experience I kind of have memory of. First time I have conscious memory that I can, there's a start point. From there, I can fill in the blanks. And that's probably around 4 to 5 years old. And so what happens is memory becomes integrated. Before it's ephemeral. It just comes and goes, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in California. We've moved. I've lived in 38 states. I mean, I'm a nomad that way. But I remember getting in trouble, which seemed to be a constant in my life. and we had a Cocker Spaniel named Smokey. And I remember that my dad came in to basically beat us for whatever my brother and I had been up to. And that dog would not let him get to us. Absolutely. It defended me, right? And I remember smiling again, right? you can be mad at me, you can do everything, but you're not going past that dog. I love that dog, by the way. You see what I mean? And so we do. We love anybody that defends us, anybody that helps us. You see, it's a natural outpouring. And these are characteristics that we start developing the characteristics of our life as we go through, right? And so what I get, I had a joyous of being alive at 1.5, and now I have appreciation, right? That in negative circumstances that I can find some sort of help, right? Somebody on my side. And that's another aspect of the work I do. When I work on you, I'm on your side, right? I'm all for you, right?
That's
anyway,
neat.
So from that point on, then it becomes more or less a regular, well, not exactly.
I was gonna say regular.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, some things don't change. I don't think that you have stopped being someone who gets in trouble.
Right. No. That even today, all the people I went to high school with, you still getting in trouble. It's a common greeting for me.
Yeah.
At 5 years old, I moved to the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. You can look it up, Harjo, Tecumseh. And remember, this is, 70 years, 60 years, 5 years ago. Those places they were very tiny, I'll put it that way. But we moved out in the country. I wasn't going to school, but at 5 years old, I got me a Davy Crockett outfit and a BB gun.
No way.
That'll probably get us banned for mentioning guns, but anyway. And I would tell my mother, I will be back. And I became an explorer. Back then, I'd go out the door at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd come back at 5, 6 in the evening. And I wandered the creeks and the fields and I started learning about my world. And to this day, I'm perfectly at home in the woods, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up as a Native American. My grandmother wouldn't eat store-bought meat, is what we call it. So starting at literally 5, 6 years old, I would hunt for her. Rabbit, squirrel, quail, turtles, anything, that was traditional diet that she'd been raised on. And I did that until I was about 18 years old. I would hunt for her. So now, my grandmother would be what everybody else in my family terms mean, right? And I really liked her. I can't explain that. Maybe because she cooked for me, and she was a fantastic French cook, ultimately, but or Native American cook. But I enjoyed that, and I learned those ways of living, right? And for anybody out there who doesn't know what that's like, until I was 12 years old, we would pull water from a well. We would chop wood for a fire. We, during the wintertime, lived under 6 or 8 blankets, things like that. So life was a lot different then. Even my daughter didn't believe half this stuff.
Did you guys use an outhouse?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we moved to town, and life became different. It wasn't up with the chickens and down with the cows kind of thing, right? So that kind of lifestyle has become very popular and romanticized. And I can tell you, having lived through growing up on farms and stuff, it is not romantic. It is hard work. And it goes on from about 4:30 in the morning till dark 30 at night every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You can
and
make
your
it romantic though, Randy. To
Yeah,
each his own, right?
you're right. But your existence becomes tied to literally being alive, right? Being able to eat. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
5 years old, 6 or 7 years old, 5 years old, you grow up bathing in a wash tub. Number 5 wash tub. And that's funny because I read something the other day about, like the oldest got to bathe first and the youngest got to bathe last. You see what I mean? That's where this term of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because the bathwater is so dirty you might not even see the baby. And I laugh at that and I go, because I lived that. At which my daughter would go, no, right? Because they have no sense of history. And I think that is the biggest thing, is just like we're talking now. I've never really talked about all this to anybody, so thank you.
No, you're welcome.
But, when you go back and start looking at this thing, I'm giving the highlights, the ones that have spiritual implications. Being beaten, being abused, and starving to death, and not having food. Those are all spiritual imperatives too, or impulses, right? So you can take the positive as something to move your life on in a spiritual manner or evolving manner, or you can take the negatives. It doesn't make any difference. But in our lifetime, it's become very popular again. Oh, you had negative experiences. And it's like, no, I had ice cream. Once a month, we would go to town and I'd get to have a Coke float. You see what I mean? Like, oh my God. Oh, and I got to buy BBs. It's like, how much more satisfying could life be than that? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's gelatos and cappuccinos and whatever else.
It's a different type of. We got different options and different ways to satisfy ourselves too. We also have Twitter. Throw that out. Throw that out there.
Yeah. So again, everybody out there should know that you can use a positive or a negative to answer yourself, right?
I couldn't agree more.
But people seem to be fixated on, this is what happened, and the answer is no. You're a mosaic. There's a lot that happened, and it happened externally, or it happened internally in your internal landscape. And like I said, at 5 years old, most people abandon that, and with me, it expanded. So that's another major difference. And what that means is my imagination expanded. Remember being out in the woods all day, right?
Yeah.
I still maintain the imagination, the internal landscape that I had when I was a child. And I still do to this day. I have a vast imagination, right? And people go, what's that like? And I go, well, as vast as mine is, I could not imagine our current circumstances in the world.
Let's leave that to
complete.
We'll leave it to the creator, right? We'll let him imagine our circumstances in the world.
Yeah.
Can I speak to something? I mean, the environment you lived in sounded, as you said, like a very small town, so it was pretty safe. But I wanted to highlight the fact that maybe more so
That's
your
not
mom.
true, by the way, but anyway.
Oh, okay.
No, it's very violent. It's
Okay.
a very violent existence, right?
All right, great. Can you speak on that? Because what I was going to say next was, it seemed your mom was very comfortable with you being this David Crockett explorer kid. Which was like,
she was. I was. We'll call it independent, right?
Well, you saved her life.
Colin Wilson wrote a book called The Outsider, not the one they did the movie or the song or anything, but he describes a circumstance of being around 12 years old, and he was sitting at their table with his family, and he had the experience of standing outside the dining room window looking in. And I went, wow, I have that same kind of experience of life. I'm in it, but not exactly of it, would be the proper language, right? And so I had this imagination and curiosity leads to exploration. And I invite anybody that when they explore their life, And it gets to that point later. We talk about abandoning judgment. Really, the only way you can explore your own life is without judgment, right? This was good, this was bad. What difference does it make, right? And if you can't come to neutrality with your judgment, you basically should leave your past alone, is what I call it. So I was able to go exploring. I started school, and from day one, it was a violent experience. I basically fought every day of my life, right? And I got good at fighting, or I thought, and to the point that nobody would fight me individually, but they would jump me from behind, or groups of them, and I got better at fighting. And that'll be the second episode of 18 when I started Kung Fu, right? Because I wanted to learn to fight better. So there's something wrong with that statement I learned later, but right? So
it's not the most interesting statement about fighting that you've made. I remember in the previous conversation, we were talking about gaining more physical awareness,
right,
and being, more inclined to want to sustain our life. And you said there's nothing better than being physically present than getting involved in knife fighting.
Right, because fighting takes away all thinking. You see what I mean? I laugh at all these people that, and I've taught meditation for like 45 years. I've taught Kundalini yoga, meditation, all this stuff, consciousness. And it's the funniest thing in the world to me that somebody like, how do I meditate? Well, you sit down and, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And hopefully you'll get to a point of not thinking. Ultimately, that's the whole goal of any meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, or you can get in a fight. The world disappears. It literally comes down to that moment, right? And it's one of the martial arts I teach. Is first martial arts awareness. That's what we talked about at 1.5. Then comes balance. I'm coming into balance with the universe when I'm 5. And then comes the moment. The moment when you exist, period, at this point, and nothing else exists. That's the knife fight, or the fight that goes on. You literally come back to yourself. But most people lose themselves in that. Now, that's where they went too far, we say, right? So there's coming back to yourself and losing yourself. And losing yourself is to be avoided, whether it's passing out or getting drunk, or, you don't want to lose yourself in this universe, right? It's bad. So first day of school, go out to recess, and a kid decided he didn't like me and hit me in the back of the head with a baseball bat. The fight's on. So there's the inflection point. Why am I so aggressive? And I had 3 Kung Fu grandmasters tell me one day I should quit fighting because I love it too much. And I go, well, you either got to hate it or love it. And so I made the switch of being a very loving person when I fight. So I thought that was pretty odd. At 38, 39 years old, they tell me I should quit fighting. I was still fighting that in competition and stuff. So you see what happens. It's like every experience gives you an option. You can advance yourself from that experience, or you become locked in. And now we go to what Maslow called hinge points in our psychology that we go beyond. And that what happens is you hit these hinge points, and then you'll tend to orbit your consciousness around them. I used to be married. I used to be an alcoholic. I used to be this. I did, right? And that orbiting keeps you from continuing your timeline. There we go, right?
That's what I call, at least the concept of that is what I describe in my book as living in hell.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not living in life, right? You're not living in this universe, right? Mm-hmm. You're living in a construct is the proper language. So anyway, that's first day of school, and people are like, why do you fight? Well, so here we go, that hinge point. Somebody hit me in the back of the head, man, I come out swinging, right? And by the way, that's also when I got dragged into the principal's office for fighting, right? Mm-hmm. Now, boy that hit me did not get anything. And so I became slightly distrustful of authority.
I was just gonna say that. So your perceptions of fairness, this is where it started getting chipped. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Now, we figured out that you could have filled out pay-per-view stadiums while you were in grade school. But how did the grades turn out? How did you do in school?
I did good. There were several. Like I said, these hinge points come at you all the time. Third grade, playing basketball out on the court, had a steel post for the basketball court, and a kid shoved me, and I hit my head and split it open, right? And this one. And so I put my hand ahead to go to the teacher, right? And it's really funny because I said I hurt myself, which was not true. You see what I mean? I allowed myself to be hurt would be more appropriate. You see what I mean? Like, don't hurt yourself. Remember, 1.5 year old. And the teacher yanked my hand around, half hand off my head, and looked at me and then slapped me for hurting myself. we call that positive reinforcement. So I had to take and get me sewn up. You know, it's like, wow, we're off to a rocky start here. Hinge points. Go into the hallway, sit on your butt, put your head between your knees, and kiss your whatever goodbye because of the nuclear bombs are going to come and bomb us all. If you think it's bad now with the current political situation, think about every week going into a hallway or going into the basement of the radiation shelter because they're going to bomb you out of nuclear existence, right? So, well, my entire generation has that experience. Another hinge point. You see, they're everywhere. But you can get locked into fear like people are doing now and never evolve behind it unless you can keep moving. That's the key, right?
I can't say that any better, Randy. I'm sure I've had past lives on this planet, but you know, today I look at the history of the world and I can appreciate that in every single moment of existence there have always been opportunities for catastrophe. I mean, of epic proportions, right?
Yeah.
And I just wondered, but wait a minute. This has always been. But still people have been able to exist in a comfortable way, knowing that this was around. It wasn't like they just said, I'm going to ignore it. They found a way to integrate that information and then use it to their benefit, either to grow or to use it as a hinge point, like you say, or to stay in hell and just play around with it.
Exactly.
And I thought, there's got to be a way to live with this knowledge and not let it basically overtake you or get lost in it. No, I love it.
Yeah, that's number one reality, your immediate reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what I call proximate reality. How far can you reach, right? That's what you can influence. And you know, for most people, that's 3 or less. That's all I can reach. I can reach the water, I can reach the food, I can reach whatever, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Now, thanks for saying that. Let's jump again. So let's jump again.
We're up to about, 8 or so, I guess, when I hit my head, or right?
Yeah, but we've gone up to even maybe, you mentioned 35 when you were still fighting. And your grandmasters.
That's that 18 to 35. That's the fighting years, whatever. Right?
Yeah. Did you travel internationally to continue fighting training? Did you ever spend time abroad?
No, I was. That's that 18 to 35 thing where I was invited to Taiwan and to China and all kinds of places. But that whole culture we'll get into later, right?
Okay.
So we're still. Your grades. We're talking about grades.
Your grades, yeah.
So back to third grade, another important event happened. They introduced the new math. older people in the United States will remember this, right? New math was X plus Y equals Z, right? Forget numbers, right? And I brought that book home. It's a little orange book. I still remember it. And I went to my mom and I said, I need some help with this. And she looked at me, she said, son, I can't help you with that. You're on your own. And I went, okay. You see what I mean? It's like I was accepting of the fact, as opposed to being mad at her or finding fault. You see what I mean? We go out at each other. Oh, I'm on my own. Like, what's wrong with that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, well, it violates our concept of that we always need to be around somebody else to find validation in the existence of another person, right? And we don't need that. We can look in the mirror, right? It's there's a famous song out there. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're as great as me.
Sounds like Kanye West right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's funny. Mac Davis wrote that song. I think everybody should listen to it. It's basically a story of my life. But anyway, bad joke. Yeah. So where were we? Oh, new math. So I was on my own. Well, I trying to figure it out. I finally figured it out and did quite well with it. But here's how I did well, is I couldn't make the formulas work, but I could know the answer. And this is important. I could no longer rely on my intellect. I had to go with what I call knowingness or the truth. Okay? Mm-hmm. And this is probably the major thing that happens as a shift of consciousness, is where you go from using the intellect to arrive at an answer where you know the truth. And if you know the truth, you know the outcome. It's called action, sequence, consequence. Okay? We can get into that much later. But later at the end of this, I got a little scholarship to go to one of the local universities and a math class, and they gave me a whole list of problems the very first day. And I answered every question and handed it back to them in about 3 minutes. Now, the rest of the class took about an hour to figure out that test. And when the test came back, I had an F from my first university class.
You didn't show your work?
I didn't show my work. Now, the next 30 years, I tried to show my work. It's ridiculous. You have to abandon that because you know the truth of any situation. You have the ability to discern the truth or you don't. And this is what Hawkins eventually came back with much later in life, where he says, if you can't discern the truth, you have to believe what people tell you. Right? And you exist in a belief system.
Can you say that
imaginary
again?
System, right?
Yeah. Can you say that again, please?
If you can't discern the truth, you have to believe what people tell you. And even worse, you have to believe what you tell you, which is one of the most horrible things in the world, right? Because at that point, you're trying to be right, as opposed to being truthful. And the major conflicts in our life come with people trying to be right instead of trying to be truthful. There you go. So
wow, there's so much truth in that, and it speaks to the work that you're doing, where you say, I help people be themselves. Right. I reset people to being themselves. Similar work to what I am trying to do. Even I know I'm still working at this. Is remember who and why you are. Like if you know who you are, you know why you are. That's your truth. Right. And I do a very simple example where if I say, oh, I'm talking to a printer today, you know, there is no way that would either trigger you or make you upset because you know you're not a printer. I'm Randy Veitenheimer. That's who I am. Right. I'm not a printer. You may actually worry about my sanity. Like, what's wrong with you, Roland? You need to get yourself checked, right? Right. Yeah. But that's really beautiful, because when you don't know yourself and you're not sure, you don't know your truth, then somebody's going to tell you that. And it's going to be more confusing. And it speaks to going out of yourself to finding yourself. And a very good example is today on the COVID vaccine, for instance. Should we take it? Should we not take it? This study says this. This study says this. When you go out and you're not truthful, or you're not in a space of truth with your relationship with the vaccine or the viruses, then you're going to be confused. Exactly. But just think about aspects of your life where you're not confused about. You're so adamant,
Yeah,
you're
no.
so truthful about. That's kind of a nice tell to say there's a gap between what you know about yourself
Yes.
and your relationship to maybe the vaccine that you haven't yet explored and
Exactly.
been,
Exactly.
curious enough about. And so it'll make it difficult for you to decide. And then you're going to end up asking this person
Right.
and that person.
Right. Right.
That is
Then
so true.
what you accept the opinion or judgment of others, right? There we go out of judgment. And one of the key elements, like when I work on a person, I use your name. It's like an internet address, only it's more like a universe address. Once I have somebody's first name, I can tap into anywhere they are in the universe, and basically their entire information field is available to them, their entire timeline. And so, that has a lot of implications, but basically if you're not yourself, you don't have access to it. I do. And I think you should. I mean, that's it. It's if you have access to being yourself, the question of like, take the vaccine, yes. Don't take the vaccine, yes. It's always yes.
Yeah.
But it's yes for you. That becomes the subjective nature of the universe, right? Is that you have a truth of being the truth of you, and we want to use that as a baseline to measure. Should I eat this or should I drink that? And your body will respond. We call that applied kinesiology, muscle testing. Only I use a really advanced version of what I call field testing, where the field responds like in a 10,000th of a second. You got to be really quick to catch it, but it'll tell you the answer, everything, right?
Yeah.
In a positive or negative way, right? So
Absolutely. Now, this actually feeds very well into the next area of your life I wanted to touch on, which was what I would call today the spiritual aspects. And I laugh at that statement because everything is spiritual, really, in my opinion.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So
it's the level you choose to relate from. It's the same thing, level is conscious. But the spiritual exploration, I think we're up to 12. We'll go to about 14, right? And this is where strange and, well, at 10 years old, there was another experience where I lost about 3 days. It's called a time gap. And one of the things about humans, we hate a gap in our experience of life, right? We hate it. So I lost 3 days there, alien abduction, whatever you call it, right? So, but after that, I don't know so much before, but after that, I had a very different level of consciousness, right? Or the intellect. From about 8 or 9 years old, somewhere in there, I had an eidetic memory. I could read a book and tell you page, sentence, paragraph, the whole thing, right? So at 8 years old, they didn't know what to do with me in school. Let's start there. All right. Do we have time?
Yes, but
Okay.
This would actually be great. I think we may have to make this into a 2-part conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with 8 years old and not knowing what to do with me in school because I was a problem. All right. We'll call it that. All right.
We will. And so
Okay.
just to close this one then, I mean, for anyone who is listening, I really don't need to say anymore. This would be the end of the first part of getting to know Randy Veitenheimer and his spiritual journey. Fascinating conversations so far. We've learned so many things, including the fact that he allowed himself to get hurt twice after getting his head after getting his head split open and then allowing his teacher to slap him in the face again. I can laugh at that now because, of course, you're healthy and you're well and you're conversating with me, and I appreciate that. But if you're listening, you know how to connect with Randy Veitenheimer. I will have links in the notes section of this podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be right in the notes section of this YouTube video, as well as connecting with me, getting a copy of Who and Why You Are. It's available everywhere. The audiobook is also available. But thanks for listening, and just stay tuned for part 2 of the conversation, where we pick up from 8 years old and going
Excellent.
forward. All right.
Actually fun. I enjoy it. Thank you. All right.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Randy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Goodbye, everybody. All right.